Hello, welcome to the Hahn Horticulture Garden. My name is Scott Douglas. I'm the director of the garden. We're going to do a virtual video tour of the garden. This area here that you see now is our entrance to our pavilion building. It's a space that we use for rental events and educational events. And our student interns are actually in the process of mulching this area right now. So we just replanted this spring, and the building needed a facelift, so this was an easy way for us to give it a facelift. So we're going to continue this way. We're going to walk towards our vegetable garden. So our vegetable garden is one of the more popular spots in the garden. It's a great opportunity for us to show people where their food comes from. We have some early spring crops in right now, a lot of lettuce and kale, onions, radishes, things like that. And we're slowly in the process of changing those to tomatoes, peppers, and more summer type and vegetables. Now that we've passed our last frost date, our staff is working to upgrade and install these new plants for the summer. If you want to come closer, we can take a look at some of the plants. This lettuce is kind of cool. It has these red speckles on it, which adds a little bit of color to things. You can see some tomatoes that have just been planted. And Paul, our horticulturist, when he plants tomatoes, these tomatoes are actually about 18 inches tall, and he sunk them down in the ground in order to encourage them to develop more roots. So we'll have happy, healthy tomatoes once they take off. There's also onion and garlic in some of these beds here. And then he uses the bamboo fencing in order to try and keep the rabbits out. It's an ongoing battle for us to keep the rabbits out of the beds. And then this paving here is interesting because it was built by a class. We try to do as much hands-on things as we can with students. And this was built by the Ag Tech Hardscape Construction class like 3 years ago, I believe. So now these students can come back and be like, hey, I built that. And they always seem to take a good sense of pride when they're able to show people things that they have done. So now we're going to kind of continue down towards the meadow. So this patio space here is one of the event spaces that we use when we're hosting events. An interesting tidbit about this patio is this used to be a very sunny patio in the afternoon. So we actually had Willow Springs Tree Farm come out with their tree spade, and they moved the 4 red maples. They used to be over by our parking lot, and they used the tree spade to dig them and move them over here. That was about 5 years ago. And now we have these big, healthy, happy red maples that provide some really nice shade in the afternoon. So they were probably about 4-inch caliper when we planted them, and now they're grown to about 6 inches in the last 5 years. So it's never too late to plant a tree, and you can always plant bigger trees than the little ones that you can find at Lowe's and Home Depot. You just have to find a company who's willing to come out with a tree spade to dig those holes. So we like to highlight trees as we're walking through. This one here is a serviceberry. You can see the fruit are all ripening on the serviceberry. So this is a great native tree that the fruits can be used for jams and jellies and things like that. But it's a good native tree. People are always looking for alternatives to the non-native plants, and the serviceberry is a great alternative. Has beautiful white flowers in the spring and then the fruit in the early summer. So we're going to keep walking down the hill here. We're going to head down towards our meadow garden. The viburnums are kind of finished blooming here, but they'll also fruit. They'll have berries on them later in the season. The buckeyes getting ready to bloom. You can see the blooms kind of starting to form here on the buckeyes. Buckeye's cool. It has this big broad leaf pattern. And this area here is mainly, the main purpose of it is to screen the baseball stadium. We are right next to the baseball stadium, so we're trying to minimize the impact that that has on the garden. You can see a few more service berries here with the beautiful red berries on them. So, plant to note as we're walking through here is the oak leaf hydrangea. You can see they're starting to bloom here. And then they have this really cool coarse leaf. I like the big leaves on these. And then these also have really nice fall color. So they'll turn kind of a burgundy maroon color in the fall. So you get a nice flower, you get nice fall color. It's a really interesting plant, and they make a good buffer planting. More buckeyes here that are starting to bloom. Then a few more hydrangeas. So we're coming down to what we call our meadow garden. So it is a collection of native and cultivar of native plants, a lot of grasses, perennials. It's something that we mow every spring, mow it down to the ground. Occasionally we burn it. Fire is a key component to maintaining a meadow, so we do occasionally burn it. We wanted to burn it this year, but ended up the weather and everything just didn't work out, and by the time we could actually burn it, things were already starting to come out. But this space is nice because it changes. It'll be really low when we first cut it, and then by the end of the fall it'll be 4 to 5 feet tall. But you can see here some of the penstemon are blooming, these white flowers that the bees are working here. We've got monarda and milkweed over here. And this area changes. When the Amsonia was blooming, it was very blue, and now some of these other colors are starting to take over. Like these monarda right here have a beautiful pink flower. And then we've got milkweed and other monardas. And we built this really nice seating area here. So the meadow historically was kind of a hot place that people didn't necessarily come visit. So we created a seating area with the overhead canopies, and now this has become a very popular spot for students and faculty to come hang out. Wi-Fi from the university, Wi-Fi does reach down here, so they can come down here and work and study. And this area kind of wraps around over here, and so it's just really cool how the grasses kind of grow and overtake everything. So the cow is one of the permanent art installations here at the garden. It was donated by Mr. and Mrs. Hahn. They purchased it from a local artist who built, I think she built like 6 or 7 of them, and the Hahns bought a couple for their private property, and then they donated one to the garden. So it's a fun combination of a fuel tank, a bucket, some bicycle handlebars, and then some cutouts of a chicken and a cow. It's kind of just a fun little whimsical piece that really seems to blend in with the meadow setting. So here at the garden we have a few pieces of permanent art, and this is one of those pieces. You can also see the common milkweed through here is all getting ready to bloom. All these little balls here will end up being flowers, and then the Amsonia Back here is still blooming a little bit with the blue flowers there. Amsonia is cool because it has a nice, like, orangey colored fall color, so you get a cool flower in the spring, nice frilly foliage during the summer, and then nice fall color in the fall. We also have a couple native trees planted through here. There's a couple Kentucky coffee trees and a couple oak trees. Again, we're trying to focus on things that are more native through here. These red buds are called Carolina Sweetheart. They're really cool because they hold that red color all through the summer. They also have some white variegation, and the new young leaves are this really bright reddish burgundy color. So you get this kind of multicolored pattern to them, and then they kind of age to that darker color, but a very striking tree. It's always good from a landscape design perspective to incorporate some plants that aren't green in order to kind of spice up your landscape. So these are a beautiful specimen tree. So this project here that's under construction right now is a new open-air pavilion that we'll be using for rental events. The garden is not fully funded by Virginia Tech. Most of our daily operation budgets comes from money that we raise, and rentals covers 50 to 60% of our yearly operating budget. So historically, this area was a turf lawn that people would put rental tents over, and then the turf would get destroyed, we'd resod it, destroy it again, and just this vicious cycle. So now we'll have this permanent structure, so we don't have to rent tents anymore. We'll have a solid concrete floor, there's lights, ceiling fans, tons of power plugs for bands and DJs and things like that, and it's really gonna revolutionize how we support rental events. We currently do about a dozen weddings a year, and we're hoping with this we can up that number to 18 or 20 weddings per year. And it's got the traditional Hokie stone column base. Most buildings at Virginia Tech have some Hokie stone on them, and then it'll have tapered columns that'll match our existing building. And then of course we'll landscape the whole area around it once they're done building it. So we're really excited, and it should be, hopefully it'll be completed in July so that we'll be ready for fall tailgates and weddings. So this area here, we call it our stream garden. It's a man-made water feature that has a pond on this end, and then a nice waterfall here, and then a small stream that comes down from up the hill. This is a man-made water feature. So there's 3 pumps at the bottom that recirculate water to the top. It has a rubber liner that's been covered with stone, so you can't see the liner anywhere. We have a collection of koi and goldfish in the pond. There's also some catfish in the pond that we're not quite sure how they got in the pond, but we do have some catfish in there as well. Occasionally we'll pull out a snapping turtle out of there, but not very often, but occasionally we'll find a turtle in there. We also have a family of ducks who calls this home, so they're kind of in and out. And it's lined with a lot of aquatic plants because we're trying to balance the nutrients that the fish are releasing. So those plants are absorbing those, and we're trying to come to a nice chemical balance there so that it's kind of a self-sufficient ecosystem. But ponds are a lot of work. Our staff has to get in there and clean things out periodically. The deep part of the pond is almost 4 feet deep People always ask us where our koi go in the wintertime, and they all just go down to the deep end, and they basically go into a state of almost hibernation down there in the deep end. And then when the water warms up, they come back. We do offer koi fish food. So if people want to feed the fish, we will provide them food. We catch a lot of people feeding them other things, and we try to avoid that as much as possible. Bread seems to be the one thing people always want to feed them, but they're supposed to be on a basically zero carb diet. So I've also found people feeding them Doritos before. So we try and protect them as much as possible. This was built in the early 2000s, so some of the koi are original, and they've been here for over 20 years. So this is a big leaf magnolia. As you can see, it has a very big leaf for a deciduous magnolia, and it has these amazing huge blossoms, and it is blooming right now, which is really cool. They have these very nice kind of magenta, dark purple accents inside the flowers here. A lot of people miss the flower on this tree because they're kind of high up, but it's nice when you can actually climb up and get a closer look at one. It's a really cool plant here. And it also creates a nice little shaded area for this bench here. We try to incorporate a lot of seating areas in the garden. This one was donated in honor of Jane Floyd, who is a huge supporter of the garden, and she passed away in like 2017. So now this is an area in her memory. Very popular spot. You can sit on this bench and enjoy the waterfall and have a little bit of privacy, but not too private. And then there's also this cool ginkgo here. Ginkgo is a non-native tree, but has these really interesting fan-shaped leaves, and then has this intense yellow fall color. So we love ginkgos. We have a few in the garden. This is one of the smaller ones because this one was just planted in 2017. On the other side is Purple Ghost. That is a Japanese maple that has really nice burgundy foliage. It's a really cool accent plant. Again, it stands out from the blue color of the cedar behind it. So the juxtaposition of blue and burgundy really makes those two colors pop. This area here is what we call the Trident Maple Alley. There's a dozen Trident maples along this walkway. So forms an alley. An alley was technically like a tree-lined road or driveway, but in this instance it is just a walkway. Trident maples are great because they have really cool form. They have this kind of exfoliating bark, and they're also very deeply rooted. A lot of your maples are shallow rooted, and so you can't grow a lot of plants around them. But with the Trident maples, we can actually plant right up against them. So they're really nice in that respect. The one negative of the Trident maple is it's a big reseeder. So these little seed pods, I mean, these trees are dropping tens of thousands of these seed pods every year. So we're constantly battling seedlings, which I'm assuming is one of the reasons why you don't see it a lot in the trade. But here it has created such a nice space that we're really happy to have these here. We also have these uplit, so if you come by here at night, these have 3 lights shining up into each of them, and it creates this really cool feeling through this space here. It's also a nice representation of a shade garden. We've got Solomon seal and hostas and different carexes and lantern roses, a lot of things that will grow in a basically full shade environment. It's a really nice display of that kind of stuff. Some other interesting plants, Japanese akuba has this cool green leaf with this mottled yellow variegation on it. It's really neat, good way to kind of brighten up a dark space by introducing that yellow color. We have hostas with different variegations from light greens and dark greens to some that have yellow on them. These hostas over here have more of a blue hue to them. So again, trying to mix up colors with the blue hue and then a more lime color. Those colors play off of each other really nice. And then like this really coarse big leaf compared to this carex here with that real fine texture. When you pair those two together, it looks really nice together. Then we have a collection of ferns through here as well. The turf area over here is what we call the wedding lawn. That's where most weddings occur. A lot of times you'll have the couple and the officiant set up at the bottom of the hill here, and then chairs going up the hill, and that's where the wedding ceremonies will be. And then they'll move over to another part of the garden for their reception. It's a nice area. The shade gets cast over that in the afternoon. So it's a nice spot for a wedding. So another piece of art in the garden. This was donated by Warren and Margie Kark. It's called the Made in the Mud, and it was a Frank Lloyd Wright piece. This is a reproduction, but it's a really neat piece of art that really kind of blends into the garden space here. And then boxwoods, we have a lot of boxwoods in the garden. Saunders Brothers Nursery is a leading industry leader in boxwood development, and they have provided a lot of the boxwoods that are here in the garden. Our small pond is currently under construction. We had to put a new liner in. So that's a project that we're working on to hopefully get wrapped up soon, but it's just a smaller version of our stream garden. So there is a liner and then stone on top of that, and there'll be water that recirculates through there. But one of our favorite trees in the garden is this large ginkgo tree. So we saw the small ginkgo earlier. This is a very large, very mature ginkgo, and when it turns yellow and drops all of its leaves, it's an amazing event every fall. So we love having that ginkgo here in the garden. It is a nice anchor to this side of the garden. There was actually a wooden deck that was built around it, and the ginkgo got so big that the roots were actually starting to push the deck up. So we've removed that deck in order to preserve the health of the tree. Because here at the garden, the health of the plants is our main goal, and then the human experience is second. So we're sacrificing getting rid of that deck in order to make sure the tree lives another 50 years. Some other interesting plants. This tree here is a Stewardia, and it's actually blooming right now, or finishing blooming. It's got these delicate little white flowers on it here. It's an interesting tree. Again, it has a nice kind of exfoliating bark, and can sometimes be problematic, troublesome to get it started, but once it gets established, they seem to do pretty well. And then everybody's always surprised to see bananas growing in the garden. So this is a cold hardy banana. We do not get fruit from it. We don't have long enough of a growing season for it to produce fruit, but to get this big, lush, tropical foliage in Blacksburg, Virginia is pretty cool. So we love having these, and they just come back every year. They kind of move around a little bit. They send out little shoots, so these ones here that are growing in this Japanese maple will probably have to move out of there at some point, but it's kind of cool to have that here in the garden. This paper bark maple here. I was just informed by the campus arborist that this is the state champion paper bark maple in the state of Virginia. So there's a group that has created this list of big trees in Virginia, and they have a ranking criteria from the diameter of the tree to the actual, the diameter of the trunk, the size of the diameter of the leaf, the limbs, and then the height of the tree. And so they have a ranking system for it. And this used to be the number 2 tree, and the number 1 was actually near the drill field on campus. But the campus arborist just let us know the other day that this is now the larger of the 2. So now this is the number 1 example of a paper bark maple. Paper bark maple is interesting because, again, it has a very dark colored bark that then exfoliates as well and exposes these lighter colors. So it's a really cool, interesting tree. Something you consider planting in your yard. So this area here is our annual display beds. We do 2 plantings a year. Our interns and staff just finished doing these summer plantings, so a majority of these annuals we actually started from seed in a greenhouse, and we started them back in February, and now we've brought them out after, since the frost date was May 15th, we're good to go to do this installation now. These will stay here until the first frost kills them off in the fall, and then we'll remove all the foliage and we'll plant tulip bulbs for our spring display, and then those are over winter here. And then in the early spring we'll also come in and plant violas, which will match the tulips, and we'll have a nice color display for the early spring. And then we'll go back to a summer planting again. So we're replanting this space twice a year. It's a lot of fun to be able to change things up and do different styles and color patterns. This year is kind of a red, white, and blue patriotic style color scheme. And then who knows what we'll do next year. We do hokey colors pretty often with the tulips, because a lot of the students like to come and take their photos for graduation. But we can't do the same thing every year, so we gotta mix it up. So this circular space here has evolved over the years. A few years ago, one of our horticulturists thought it would be cool to make a garden that represented the color wheel. So we kind of cordoned off areas with boxwoods to make different spaces, and the idea was to have like the whites and the silvers and then the reds, yellows, greens, and do the color wheel. The problem is the plants are not cooperating. We've been working on this for a few years, and things keep seeding and spreading. Different bulbs start popping up, and it really hasn't worked out as well as we had thought. So we're actually kind of trying to decide how we're going to revamp this space for the next iteration of it. It does have a little brick edging here that has kind of not aged well, and we actually have a Boy Scout who's going to be doing his Eagle Scout project. They're actually going to lift all these pavers and reset them for us. So it's going to be cool to get them involved, helping us out. We've had a couple Eagle Scout projects. One built us a bookshare box that's been very popular, and now this will be the next one. They're also going to restain these trellises. These were built by students in a class probably 10, 15 years ago. And so they're also going to help us stain those in order to keep maintaining those. You can see there's clematis and roses growing on the trellises, and then a variety of perennials kind of growing through here. So this is a very perennial heavy planting. Not much to look at in the wintertime other than the boxwood, but in the summertime the colors constantly change. But just because you want to put plants where you want to put them doesn't mean that that's where the plants are going to be happy. Sometimes they'll seed and spread, and that's what we've been kind of battling here with our color wheel idea. We have a nice planting of lilacs in the early spring. The smell over here is beautiful. They kind of help screen the greenhouses from the garden so that we don't see them from here. And then we have this really nice yew hedge. This is a very mature hedge of yews that, again, kind of divide the garden up into spaces. I feel like gardens need to be divided up into rooms so that you kind of get different experiences as you're moving through it. And so this hedge kind of helps us do that. So we talked about ginkgos earlier. Most ginkgos that you find in the industry are male ginkgos. This one is actually a female ginkgo. We didn't realize it was a female until a couple years ago. So people do not like the female ginkgo because when the fruit matures and falls on the ground and you step on it, it kind of smells like poop. So the industry tries to only sell male variants, but occasionally a female will sneak through, like this one. So we're keeping it as kind of an educational opportunity. Some of the fruit are just starting to develop, but I can grab this branch. I don't know if you can. Fruit's on the underside right there, but they'll turn into these kind of light purple, probably about the size of a golf ball. And we'll just try and keep them off the walkway so that they don't stink up the garden. This area over here is our conifer garden. So it's a collection of what started out as dwarf conifers, but even a dwarf conifer is going to keep growing. It just doesn't grow at the same rate. So a lot of these are bigger than what you think they'd get, but it's mainly just because they've been here so long. We also have a tall Chamaecyparis over here, which is the state champion example of that tree here in the state of Virginia. So it is an Alaskan cedar. The limbs kind of hang down, and that allows it to shed snow off the limbs. And it's a really cool specimen tree over here in this part of the garden. We also have some kinetic sculptures that move when the wind's really blowing. And those were donated to the garden by Warren and Margie Kark as well. And they kind of add a fun little flair to this space here. And we're also excited, this space, while we usually use it for weddings, there is a theater group that's going to do a production of Midsummer Night's Dream here in this area this summer. So we're excited about that in July. We're also going to transition into our edible garden. So this, again, features a lot of plants that have edible fruits, or the plants themselves are edible. This is a crab apple, and you can see it's loaded with small crab apples, so those are still maturing. But we'll have a really good crop of crab apples. Some people like eating the crab apples. We've got blueberries that have fruited but not quite mature yet. And our Asian pears up here are fruiting as well. So we'll have a nice collection of fruit from them. And then again, more seating. We're trying to create spaces for students and visitors to come and hang out. So we're trying to tuck little seating nooks here or there throughout the garden. The vines on this trellis over here, there's a combination of grapes and hops over here. So we will have grapes usually later in the season. And then the hops is a perennial hops that comes back every year as well. This area, we have a group of master gardeners who have volunteered to help maintain this space. So this is one of the spaces where volunteers are about 80% responsible for it. Our staff still takes time to make sure everything is going as needed, but the volunteers do most of it. We also like to highlight containers with plants that may be not cold hardy here. So these containers will move into a greenhouse space over the winter, and then once it warms up, we'll bring those out. But just fun collections of succulents and other plants that aren't cold hardy here. So this area here is what we call the xeric garden. It's kind of it's a collection of plants that like a more dry soil, so it's a very gravelly soil through here, but you've got a lot of euphorbia and yucca and other plants that can handle more dry environment. We also have some big agaves that we move out here. They have not been moved out here yet, but we will move them out for the summer months. And they add a very lush tropical look to it because they're probably 4 to 5 feet across and about 4 foot high and just have these really big, broad leaves. But the euphorbia, everybody loves the look of the bloom of the euphorbia. And I like this one. It has such a cool silver look to it. I like the color of that one. And this is a kind of unusual plant. It's a variegated black gum. It looks really nice right now with the sun hitting it. It really highlights that yellow variegation on the leaves. But it's a really cool, interesting specimen plant and really stands out in this little corner here, especially when the sun's hitting it just right. And again, we're trying to create a buffer here along the perimeter of the garden to try and minimize the noise and visual from the rest of campus. And then this is the upper part of the stream garden that we saw earlier. The pumps bring water up to here and discharge, and then it works its way back down. Again, there's a collection of irises and grasses, and we've got some lilies that are about to start blooming. There's at least one bloom there. But again, we have more seating throughout the garden, places for people to come and relax. So this is our bog garden area. There's a section here and there's a section over there. This area we actually dug out almost 2.5 feet down, put in a rubber liner, and then filled it with peat moss and sand. So it's a very wet soil environment, which is perfect for pitcher plants and Venus flytraps and things like that. Pitcher plants people think are very exotic, but there's actually a bunch of them that are native to North Carolina. And so they're cold hardy. These have been in the ground for over 2 years now. You can see that some of them are blooming right now. They have some really interesting blooms, but their main feature are these pipes where they have hairs that kind of point down and flies and bugs work their way down them. And then the hairs prevent them from coming back up. So then they fall to the bottom and then the plant absorbs the nutrients from them. But there's some cool blooms. Those blooms, these over here are kind of more kind of more of a burgundy colored bloom. And then there's also a bigger one over here. And then some of them have really interesting variegation. I love the variation on the tops of the pictures on that one. But it's kind of a cool exotic plant, but it's actually native to North Carolina. So again, people argue, you know, is it native to the region, the county, the state? But with this being native to North Carolina, I figure that's close enough where we can call it native here as well. So, and then there's some things that have kind of seeded in. The penstemon has kind of seeded in a little bit, but we'll let it bloom and do its thing, and then we'll thin it out. And then we have a little sculpture of a pincher plant. This was done for one of our art shows several years ago, and we liked it so much that we asked if we could keep it. And then we knew we were going to do a bog garden, so now he can hang out with his real friends here. Thank you for watching this video tour of the garden. I hope it inspires you to come visit the garden in person. The garden is open every day of the year, so come down to Virginia Tech and check it out.